On the morning of February 21st, 1994, Aldrich Rick Ames walked out of his $500,000 home in Arlington,
You're making
Virginia,
a big mistake.
and headed for his brand new Jaguar. He'd been with the Central Intelligence Agency for over 30 years, a man America trusted with its most sensitive secrets. He was on his way to work, just like any other day. But this day would be very different. As he got ready to drive off, his car was suddenly boxed in. FBI agents swarmed him. As they put him in cuffs, Ames blurted out, "You're making a big mistake. You must have the wrong man." He was wrong. The game was up. For 9 years, Rick Ames had been living a double life. To his colleagues, he was a counterintelligence officer, one of the guys tasked with hunting Soviet spies. But in reality, he was the mole they'd been desperately searching for. He was a traitor who had sold his country's secrets and the lives of its agents for a river of Soviet cash. This is the story of how one man's personal failures and unchecked greed led to what has been called possibly the worst intelligence disaster in U.S. history. It's the story of how Aldrich Ames betrayed America. The unlikely traitor. So how does a man commit this level of betrayal? You might be surprised to learn just how ordinary he seemed. Aldrich Hazen Ames was, in many ways, born into the CIA. His father, Carlton Ames, was a CIA analyst, and Rick followed him into the agency in 1962. But he wasn't some kind of super spy. His performance reviews were a mixed bag, bouncing between enthusiastic and just plain mediocre. There were warning signs, 2 red flags that were noted, but tragically, never connected. He had a serious drinking problem, racking up multiple dues. He was a master procrastinator, especially when it came to money, and was known for being sloppy with details, a shocking trait for a spy. By the early 1980s, Ames was a man adrift. His career had stalled. His first marriage was falling apart in a costly divorce, and he was starting a serious relationship with Maria del Rosario Casas de Pai, a Colombian cultural attaché he had recruited as a CIA set. Rosario, it turned out, had expensive tastes, and Ames was drowning in debt. He was under immense financial pressure and saw an easy way out. He wasn't driven by ideology. He had no grand love for the Soviet Union. As he'd later admit, his motivation was simple and ugly: money. He needed cash for his debts and to fund the lavish lifestyle he and his new fiancée wanted. On April 16, 1985, Rick Ames made a choice that would change history. He walked into the Soviet embassy in Washington, D.C., and offered to sell his country's secrets to the KGB. The betrayal and its consequences. That first 50 grand was just the start. Over the next 9 years, the KGB and its successor, the SVR, would funnel more than $2.7 million to Ames, with some estimates putting the total closer to $4.6 million. And what did he give them in return? Everything. He was the chief of the Soviet counterintelligence branch, a job that gave him the keys to the kingdom. He had access to nearly all CIA apparitions involving Soviet intelligence officers. He knew the names of the CIA's most valuable assets inside the Soviet Union, the spies who were risking their lives for the United States. And he gave every single one of them up. His method was disturbingly simple. He would stuff 5 to 7 pound stacks of classified documents into a plastic shopping bag, walk right out the front door of CIA headquarters, and go meet his handler for lunch. At each meeting, he'd slide over a pile of secrets and walk away with a bag of cash, usually between $20,000 and $50,000. The consequences were immediate and catastrophic. Starting in late 1985, the CIA's network of Soviet agents began to vanish. One by one, assets who had been providing critical intelligence for years went silent. The agency was flying blind. As a direct result of Ames's betrayal, at least 10 U.S. sources were recalled to Moscow and executed. Dozens more were thrown in prison. One of the most devastating losses was Major General Dmitry Polyakov, codenamed Tophet. He was the highest-ranking officer in Soviet military intelligence to ever spy for the U.S. and had provided priceless information for 2 decades. Polyakov wasn't in it for the money. He spied for ideological reasons, believing he was helping save his country from its hardliners. Ames sold him out. In 1988, Polyakov was executed. Another victim, Valery Martinov, was an officer in the Soviet embassy in Washington. He'd given the U.S. the identities of 50 KGB intelligence officers. Ames gave him up too. He was tricked into returning to Moscow, where he was arrested and killed by a firing squad. And while these men were being led to their deaths, Rick and Rosario Ames were living the high life. On a government salary that never topped $70,000 a year, Ames bought a $540,000 house, paying for it in cash. He traded his beater for a new Jaguar. His cheap suits were replaced by custom-tailored Italian ones. The couple spent thousands on home improvements, ran up huge credit card bills, and had monthly phone bills over $6,000 from Rosario's calls to family in Colombia. When the FBI later searched their home, they found 60 purses and over 500 pairs of shoes. Ames told everyone his newfound wealth came from his wife's rich family in Colombia. And for years, inside the CIA and institutions supposedly built on suspicion, the lie worked. His flashy spending was the loudest clue imaginable, but it was a clue everyone seemed to ignore. The hunt and capture. By the late 1980s, a small group inside the CIA knew something was catastrophically wrong. Sources were disappearing. Operations were failing. The KGB was acting with a chilling level of confidence, and it could only mean one thing. They had a mole. The hunt was on. In late 1986, the agency put together a special team to find the leak. It was a painful and demoralizing job. They looked at every possibility. Was the agency bugged? Were communications being intercepted? Or was it the option no one wanted to face? Was there a traitor in their own ranks? The search was led by seasoned investigators like Paul Redmond, but the core of the team included 2 women who would become obsessed with cracking the case: Sandy Grimes, and Jean Verdefuel. For Grimes and Verdefuel, this was personal. They'd known Rick Ames for over 20 years. As Grimes later said, "We knew he would not be a stranger, he would be a friend. Somebody we had probably known for a very long time." They had worked on the cases of the very agents who were now dead, and they felt a profound duty to find who was responsible. The investigation dragged on for years. The KGB even threw them off the trail for a while, planning a false story that the mole was at a different facility. But the mole hunters, especially Grimes and Verdefuel, were relentless. They built a meticulous timeline, charting every failed operation, and then began cross-referencing it with every officer who had access to that information. The breakthrough didn't come from some high-tech spycraft. It came from simple accounting. The team started digging into Ames's finances, and his lavish spending suddenly came into sharp focus. In May of 1993, the FBI opened a formal investigation, launching intensive surveillance. They bugged his home and car, put a tracker on his Jaguar, and literally dug through his trash. The aha moment came from his bank records. The investigators charted Ames's lunch meetings with his Soviet handler against his bank deposits. And there it was, an undeniable pattern. Almost immediately after every meeting, a huge sum of cash, tens of thousands of dollars, appeared in Ames's bank account. There was no other explanation. They had their man, but the FBI didn't move in right away. They watched him for another 10 months. They observed him making a chalk mark on a mailbox, a classic spy signal to his handlers confirming a meeting. They followed him to Bogota, Colombia, and watched him meet with a Russian agent. Finally, in early 1994, the FBI learned Ames was scheduled to fly to Moscow for a conference. They couldn't risk it. They feared he would defect and escape justice forever. The arrest was set for February 21st, as Ames walked to his Jaguar, the trap sprung. The longest, most painful mole hunt in CIA history was over. After the arrest, the sickening reality of Aldrich Ames's betrayal came into full view. He pleaded guilty to espionage and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. His wife, Rosario, got 5 years for conspiracy and tax evasion. In court, Ames admitted he had compromised virtually all Soviet agents of the CIA known to me. He showed almost no remorse, blaming the agency for his actions and insisting it was only about the money. For the men who died because of him, he offered nothing but cold, hollow words. The damage to U.S. national security was staggering. He didn't just cause the deaths of vital human sources. He allowed the KGB to feed the CIA bad information for years, poisoning American intelligence from the inside. The scandal was a public humiliation for the CIA, exposing its security as fatally flawed. It led to a massive overhaul of security protocols and was a major factor in the resignation of CIA Director James Woolsey in 1995. The story of Aldrich Ames is a chilling lesson in how personal greed and moral rot can grow in the most secure places. It's a story about the fragility of trust and the devastating price of betrayal. He was a man sworn to protect his country, who instead sold it out for a fancy car and a house paid in cash. His name is now etched in history as one of the most damaging traitors America has ever known. A reminder that the most dangerous enemy can be hiding in plain sight. CTA. If you found this dive into the world of espionage compelling, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into history's most fascinating stories. Let us know in the comments what other historical events or figures you'd like us to cover next. Thanks for watching.